All right, what's up, my brothers from another mother? Got Christopher Ryan on, who's the author of Sex at Dawn, and thanks for coming on, my man. It's been really cool to read your work. It was another game changer for me as well. I've talked to my audience before about The Rational Male by Rollo Tomasi, really opening my eyes to the way, we've been kind of blue pilled and sold this narrative that things are to be a certain way. And your book was recommended to me by a very good friend of mine who kind of dove into it at a dinner party we were at. And I went through it. I've only gone through it twice. I usually like reading books like that are that deep about two or three times. But I do have some questions for you. I want to do a brief summary to kind of intro you. Or do you want to do the summary to kind of distill the story behind it? Like,
Summary.
why did you write it? Like, why did you write this book about, the prehistoric origins of human sexuality?
Oh, why did I write it? Jeez, a quick summary is going to be hard, man. Basically, the backstory is that I spent most of my 20s and 30s traveling. I was on track to go to graduate school. I was studying literature as an undergrad, and I love literature, and I like the big ideas and all that kind of stuff. And so I was on track to go to grad school, and I found a loophole in the student handbook, and that I figured out I could skip my junior year and still graduate on time, thereby saving my parents a shitload of money and giving me a year to do whatever I wanted. Because I talked to my parents, and they were like, "Well, we'll keep giving you the money you were living on at school, not tuition and all that and books, but your living expenses, so you can do what you want." Because I had this plan. I wanted to go to Alaska because I wanted to see a frontier,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought that's like the last frontier. I'm not going to space or anything. Uh, so I skipped my junior year and I hitchhiked to Alaska from New York, where I was going to school, and during the course of hitchhiking across the U.S. and then I came back across Canada, and I was up there. I worked in a cannery, and I had all these adventures. I went to prison. All sorts of crazy adventures happened. And so by the time I got back to school, I was like, fuck grad school. I'm going to travel. I'm going to spend my 30s traveling and having adventures and seeing the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, man, this is not a summary. This is like my entire life story here. But the point is that travel has been one of the great passions of my life,
Yeah.
and not travel like, oh, I want to go be on this beach or I want to go scuba dive, but seeing the world from different perspectives, so that you can bring different cultural perspectives to bear on whatever issue it is you're thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And travel was my way of doing that, of getting out of my American middle class white perspective. Joseph Campbell, you've probably
Yeah.
read, the great mythologist, he called this process detribalization.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to detribalize. I wanted to get out of my tribe and see the world from as many perspectives as possible. And then the other great passion of my life is sex. I've always been really interested in sex. It's, effortless to think about because it's just innately interesting to
Mm-hmm.
me. My first girlfriend could have orgasms when I went down on her, but she didn't have orgasms when we fucked. I guess I can use that word on your.
Yeah. Swear away, man. Go
Right.
nuts.
And I thought that was really interesting, and I didn't take it as any kind of threat or to my masculinity or anything like that. I just thought that's interesting. So this kind of stimulation creates this response, but that kind doesn't. Why is that? And so I started reading. I was 15, and I went out and bought Benoit balls and vibrators and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And she was fine with me experimenting on her. So I guess the point of these stories is that these two passions sort of intersected when I was in graduate school. And I was sort of casting around. I was studying psychology, and I had a project that I was working on for my dissertation, and it was really interesting and important, and I still think it would have been a worthwhile thing to do. But the whole Monica Lewinsky, Bill Clinton thing happened,
Right.
and I looked at that and I was like, well, wait a minute, if men have controlled all the levers of power, right? Physical power, military, economic, like we've been in charge
Hmm.
forever. How did we create a world in which the most powerful man in the world is getting publicly humiliated for doing something that pretty much any guy would do?
Right.
You know, guys don't generally turn down no strings attached blowjobs.
Right. Right.
Uh, so that just perplexed me. And around that time, I saw a book. I was just hanging out in a bookstore, and I saw a book called The Moral Animal by Robert Wright.
Hmm.
And it was about this new science of evolutionary psychology. I picked the book up, and it looked really interesting. I bought it, and I devoured it. It was a great book. Very well written. It was sort of alternating chapters. One chapter would be about some principle of evolutionary psychology, and then the next chapter would be biographical about Darwin's life, some aspect of his life that illustrated the principles from the previous chapter. So it's a very interesting book. And it explained that men and women have differing reproductive agendas, that men want to spread their seed, have as many women as possible, and women want to rope one guy in to be a provider, and so there's this economic exchange of fidelity from the woman,
Hmm.
because men want to know that they're investing in their own offspring, their own genetic legacy.
And this happened after agriculture, is what you were talking about in your book too, right?
Well, see, this is the thing. Like, I read that book and I was like, wow, this makes perfect sense. This is human nature, because that's what the book says.
Hmm.
And at the time, I was living with a woman who was a stripper in San Francisco. And she had all these really smart, sort of feminist, intellectual stripper friends.
Okay.
And I was also working for a nonprofit called Women in Community Service. And I was the only guy working there, which was weird because I had to answer the phone. Women in Community Service, confusing people.
Right.
But so I was surrounded by all these really smart women. And when I started explaining to them this great insight that I'd gleaned from the book, that, women have sex with men because they're trying to, they're getting access to the resources that the men bring. And these women were all like, dude, that is such an antiquated Victorian bullshit way of looking at women.
Right. Okay.
We don't have sex because we want stuff. We have sex because it feels good.
Hmm.
In fact, it feels better for us than it does for you losers who have one orgasm and then you're out, So out of respect for these women, I went back and I started looking at the original research
Hmm.
that Wright had been citing in his book. And what I found was there's a lot of stuff that wasn't being talked about in the science, like tribes that don't give a damn about paternity. So,
And that still exists today. This isn't like a prehistoric existence. Like, there's still people that live in parts of the world today where that doesn't matter.
exactly. So there are lots of societies where the men don't care about paternity. So if that's the case, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
There are bonobos. I had heard a lot about chimpanzees. I'd read many references to chimpanzees, these male-dominated, violent, coercive, kind of coalitional, hierarchical. But I hadn't read about bonobos, who are equally relevant to any argument about human nature, because they're equally closely related to us as chimpanzees are. And bonobos are more female-dominated, egalitarian, relaxed, hypersexual. Everybody's fucking everybody.
Hmm.
Nobody has any idea whose sperm and egg combined for offspring. So it very much undermined this sort of mainstream view of human sexual evolution. And once I started getting into that stuff, I felt like I was pulling a thread on a tapestry, and the whole thing just started coming apart.
Mm.
And I got really excited then, because it's like, wow, I could be wrong, but if I'm right, holy shit, this is really interesting. This gives me an opportunity as a graduate student to possibly say something that is kind of revolutionary, which
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
a very rare opportunity. So that's how I got into it. It was my PhD thesis, and then years later, I finally got around to turning it into a book.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, you got a lot of coverage. I mean, you did a TED Talk. I mean, I've watched a lot of your video stuff that's on your website that you linked to the TED Talk and a few other interviews. Found it fascinating. It got me questioning the narrative that we've been sold our entire life about, settle down with one person, be monogamous, get married, have your 2.1 kids in a station wagon, and you die together holding hands, singing Kumbaya in the same bed beside each other, sort of thing, right? And it doesn't seem to me, based on the stuff that I've experienced in my own life, through my own experiences with relationships with women and how they behave, depending on circumstances, and the stuff that you kind of talk about in your book, like the stuff you talk in your book, kind of, I listen to less of what people say now and watch more of what happens. Like I believe actions over words now. But what I'm reading in your book had matched the actions of my experiences throughout my life, right? Like, at what point did you update your belief system or change the lens in which you viewed relationships between men and women? Like, was it the whole bonobo chimp thing, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, around that same time, I had been with a woman who was, in my 20s, I was, as I said, I was traveling a lot, and I had different relationships when I was traveling, and I had one sort of on off relationship with a woman back home who I traveled with sometimes, and but I had a very sort of tumultuous, painful relationships because I was very I would get with someone and be really happy for a while, and then I'd start to get judgmental and think, well, she's not as funny as I'd like, or, she doesn't read as much as I'd really like someone who reads more, and, or this one's, she's really beautiful, but, I don't know about the sexual connections, not as good as it was with her. And so I was getting very comparative. And
By the way, all guys do that too, right?
yeah, I
Pretty
guess
much.
so, especially, in your 20s. And so, but
Dude, I'm 44. I still do it today, okay?
well, and I would make lists and shit, and
Did you use spreadsheet? Like Excel spreadsheets with charts and stuff?
no, but Darwin did this as well.
Yeah.
Darwin made a list.
Yeah.
Before he even met the woman he was going to marry. His list was just marry or not marry,
Right.
which was interesting. And he even compared, like, well, I could get a dog, maybe a dog would be better. Wouldn't interfere with my work as much. But then I met a woman. I was with her for 6 years, and she's absolutely gorgeous. Still one of my closest friends today, but a beautiful, beautiful woman in every possible way. Just funny and sweet and kind and absolutely stunning and whatever. But she started to get on my nerves after a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hanging out with a buddy having a beer one night, and I was bitching about her. And my buddy just sort of, put down his beer and looked at me. He said, "Chris, just shut the fuck up. Like, I can't listen to you complain about this woman who's probably the most lovely woman I've ever met in my life, you dumb, unappreciative fuck." And it really struck me because I could hear myself through his ears, and I realized what an asshole I was. And I also realized that I'd been asking the wrong question. It wasn't that there was something wrong with these women. There's something wrong with everyone,
Right.
myself included, of course. But what was freaking me out was that I felt this pressure to say, this is the one, this is it for the rest of my life. And so that puts this enormous pressure on this woman where, like, she has to be absolutely perfect in every way because this is it. And so I realized that the problem is that there's no this is it. There's no country I want to live in the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. There's no, if you tell me we're taking your passport, pick a country, I wouldn't know what to do. I'd fucking panic. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I need to move. I need to be free to move, to come and go, and to, even if I never go, just to
behave in a nomadic humanoid fashion.
Right.
Yeah.
So around that same time, I read an essay written by John Perry Barlow, who was a lyricist for the Grateful Dead. He published this short essay, I think it was in Salon, in the early days of Salon.com. It's called something like A Ladies' Man and Proud, or A Ladies' Man and Unapologetic, or something like that, where he talked about his life and how he had been married and the marriage, hadn't worked out. And then he had a series of girlfriends and, and basically one of them died. And when the one died, he sort of was like, oh, I can't do this again. And the fact is, I love women. And so I can't love a woman in a way that forces me to deny the fact that I love women.
Right.
And I read that and I was like, yeah, that's me. I get it. That's exactly the point. It's not that there was something wrong with this one and that one and the other one. It's that I felt like I was signing the rest of my life away. That was the problem, not her. So that was a big pivot for me. And it was the same time, not coincidentally, that I was reading this research about human sexual prehistory, and everything just sort of in my personal life and in my intellectual life coalesced, and it all made sense.
Got it. I want to go to this timeline here that I'm going to kind of frame in my window here, right? So let's say that this is human time, okay? Where we were human beings, walking upright, bipedal, blah, 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 to like today over here. The amount of time where we've been living as we are today with agriculture is about this big, yeah? From like here to here. Like it's a very tiny slice of time.
Yeah.
So between, I'm just going to move my finger over here, and here, we've been behaving like nomadic hunter-gatherers, wandering around, kind of like we weren't having sex with strangers, as you call it. We were having sex with each other in the community, in the tribe, and the whatever they would have called it back then. How do you reconcile all that genetic programming? Our DNA in a world today where we're told to settle down, get married, be a man. If you're doing what you've felt like you've always wanted to do, which is be with beautiful women when you can, if they're open to receiving you, sort of thing, and then society shaming you. I remember there was an interview you did in which you made a very interesting comment about Anthony Weiner, where he was caught sleeping with somebody else, and he said, "Wouldn't it be great if somebody could just come out on TV and just say, yeah, that's the lifestyle that I've chosen. My wife knows. Everybody knows. What's your problem, right?" How do you reconcile all of our evolutionary history, like all this history, living in a world today where we've got stuff that because of agriculture we need to pass down to our kids. And we want to make sure that our children are ours, when we're programmed as scattered seeds, as you said, and I don't think women are any different. I mean, I want to talk about the female component because I have a question here from a woman also, but like, how do you live in that world? Like, what is the blueprint, right? What is the foundation for that? Because nothing seems to work. People get married, they get divorced. Like half of people that get married get divorced, Second time round, it's even worse. There's guys that get fleeced through the, family law system through divorce that end up nearly destitute, living in their parents' basement. It just doesn't seem to work in today's world. And I question why we're doing it that way. It's not really a question that I'm asking. I guess I'm kind of opening up the discussion a little further, but I question why I've been viewing the world in a way where it's like, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, there's a line that we quote in Sex at Dawn from Arthur Miller, who's a playwright who was married to Marilyn Monroe for a couple of years, I think. Mm-hmm. He said, an era can be considered over when its basic illusions have been exhausted. And I think we live in a moment, we live at the end of an era because pretty much every one of the basic illusions of Western civilization have been revealed to be exhausted in the last 10 years or so. It's happening very quickly. We're circling the drain and it just gets faster and faster and faster. pick an institution that was respected 20 years ago. It's gone now, right? The church, forget it. Child rapists. Everyone's, making jokes about pedophile priests. Wall Street, a conservative, safe place to put your money. Forget about that, right?
Mm.
Politics. Well, yeah, there's a little corruption, but they have our best interest at heart. Nobody believes that anymore. Whatever, pick it. It's just athletes, steroids, and, cheating and all this. Everything is sort of falling apart. And I think monogamy is one of those things that 20 years ago, people were still paying lip service to it, even though they were fucking around in secret. And now the secret's out. And I think people recognize, as you say, that it's not working, but it's part of a much larger system that's not working, which is why the book I'm finishing now, is Civilized to Death, is looking at these conflicts between our sort of evolved trajectory and the world that we're living in now. And where you have a conflict between the animal that you've evolved to be and the world, the context that you find yourself in, that conflict creates trauma. So you see it in everything, right? In physical health, we're sedentary. We're sitting around. I sit around all fucking day writing this book and doing my podcast and whatever. Well, your body suffers. Your body's not designed to be sitting around all day. You're designed to be walking 10, 15 kilometers every day.
Hunting saber-toothed tigers with spears, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing is, you mentioned saber-toothed tigers. There's this, what I call the neo-Hobbesian worldview, which is this idea, like my buddy Joe Rogan is very tied into this, that the world's super dangerous, man, and everything wants to eat you. And he's got this very sort of competitive, there are wolves everywhere kind of view.
Mm-hmm.
But from my perspective, that's very mistaken, because when you look at actual hunter-gatherers, they're very relaxed. They're very relaxed. There's very, fucking leopards don't come into the village very often. Leopards know that they're like dudes with bows and arrows and spears and blowguns, and you just want to leave people alone. We're pretty dangerous,
Yeah.
And, so stress underlies most of the vast majority of the things that kill us. You look at pretty much any disease, it's either caused or worsened by stress.
Always.
Which tells me that our ancestors were not stressed out. Our ancestors were relaxed. If our ancestors were constantly stressed the way we're told, to struggle for survival, then stress wouldn't be so dangerous for us. We would have evolved to live in a world of stress. Like rabbits. Rabbits are always stressed out because they're prey for just about everything. But rabbits don't die from stress-related illness. You don't see rabbits just going, oh, fuck it, and, having a heart attack.
Yeah.
We do, because we didn't evolve in a stressful environment. We're predators.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were talking in your book about there's not a lot of evidence suggesting that human beings didn't live that long, many, many moons ago, because you can only, I think it was the molars or it had something to do with the dental records after about the age of 30, 35. You really can't tell the age of a skeleton.
Yeah, that's part of the issue, that when they dig up these skeletons, they judge the age at death by dental eruption,
right,
which is how far the molars have come out of the jawbone. And they stop in the mid-30s. So the archaeologists would make a notation in their records of, 20, 25, 30, 35 plus. 35 plus means at least 35.
Yeah. So we were dying because our vision sucked and we couldn't see, or we broke a bone and we couldn't fix it and we just, collapsed or whatever. But it's not because of stress. I mean, stress is definitely a modern day thing.
No human being has ever been old at 35.
Right.
That's total misinformation.
I got a couple of questions here. If we got some more time. First one's from a woman. She said, super curious about open relationships versus poly. Somebody that's also read the book. Is one more natural over the other? What's the role of emotion in both? And can it truly exist?
Well, I'm not sure what the difference is between open relationships and poly. I guess polyamory is more sort of controlled. There are more rules. It's more articulated and worked out.
Hmm.
To my way of thinking, open relationships includes pretty much any configuration that the couple wants.
Agrees on, yeah.
Yeah. So, sorry, what was the last part of her question?
Uh, well, she was asking if one's more natural over the other. I'm guessing, uh, sexual relationships with many others is, it seems like the natural form based on what I read in your book versus the monogamous form. Um, but what's the role of emotion in both? I guess jealousy is what she's, driving at.
Yeah. Yeah, jealousy is an interesting thing. You know, people feel it in different ways. Some people feel very little of it.
Hmm.
I hear a lot from people in the sort of Silicon Valley world who really enjoyed Sex at Dawn. I think they because they're hackers. You know, they're trying to hack everything. These people, and so they're hacking relationship.
Hmm.
But also, I think a lot of them are sort of on the autism spectrum, and so their emotional perspective on sexual interaction is less. The emotional thing is less possessive, I think, sort of in a natural way for them. But as far as the difference between poly and open relationships, I don't really know what the difference is. It all comes down to definition.
Hmm.
But I think that as far as jealousy goes, I do think that insecurity and fear are part of human nature.
Yeah, it's fairly normal.
Yeah, but we live in a culture, as you were getting at earlier, we live in a culture that sort of focuses that fear and makes us very possessive of other people. And
Yeah,
that
so why do we get possessive of other people if we've evolved to do what we do with numerous people? Like everything about our bodies, the way that our penis, our testicles, the reproductive tracts, everything is clearly, to me, designed to work on a frequent basis, obviously, because we're banging all the time in circumstances that can't possibly result in a pregnancy. But with many different people, like one of the things that came clear in your book, I mean, like, we can talk about this very, very quickly, is, the shape of the male penis is very different from other animals out there, yeah? And, creates a vacuum. When men orgasm, the head of the penis shrinks so that it sort of doesn't vacuum out, our ejaculate. There's the between the 3 and 7 shots that come out, the first one is designed to protect from other sperm that's in there, and the other, all these different stories. And I don't want to mess up the story because you guys should really read the book. Again, there'll be a link below in the description. You should pick up a copy. But it seems obvious as hell to me that we're designed to kind of like, hey, she looks good, let's get together tonight, and da 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 over here looks good, and maybe we'll play this weekend, maybe we'll all play together, sort of thing. And it's like, how do we honor our genetic programming in the nut bar world that we live in today, with government, society, religion, our parental upbringing? Like how does that work?
Well, I think it was Bob Dylan who said, if you're going to be an outlaw, you have to be honest.
Hmm.
And I think that's a thought I come back to a lot. If you're not going to do things the standard, sort of conventional, socially acceptable way, you have to be honest, because otherwise you're just a prick.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, I hear from people who, women particularly, who say, yeah, some guy, I was with this guy, we had a relationship, and then I found out that he was sleeping around, and he was like, oh, read this book, it'll explain,
That's not going to work.
Yeah, I'm not down with that. So, I think that people should, when you get together, there's certain things you talk about, right? Like, do you want kids or not?
Right.
That's like right there. That's first date material,
Mm-hmm.
or at least first 3 dates material, right? Are you into girls? Are you bi? How do you feel about this? And I think there are these sort of things that you talk about early on, and I think one of them should be, how do you feel about monogamy?
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people get into relationships under false pretenses, especially guys who know in their hearts, like, I'm not monogamous. I'm just not. But I really want to have sex with this woman, so I'm going to pretend I am. And then if it leads to a relationship, well, I'll figure it out then. And
Hmm.
then when that happens, then it's like, well, I'm going to sleep around because that's really who I am. But we have a don't ask, don't tell thing, even though
Right.
we've never talked about it. Well, that's just all bullshit.
Yeah, it's all deception. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the way you handle it is you say at the beginning, you say, look, here's who I am. I went on Tinder a couple of years ago. A friend of mine was, like, dude, you got to check out Tinder. So I signed up for Tinder,
Hmm.
and I was in Portland at the time. And I saw a lot of people in their Tinder profile mention sex at dawn.
Oh, okay.
And I
Okay.
thought, that's really funny, uh, because it's become a code, right?
Oh, I see.
If you mention Sex at Dawn as like one of your favorite books or something, it means you're open to talking about this stuff.
Okay, well, there you go, folks. If you're on Tinder or like any of the swiping apps, Sex at Dawn, make sure that you start the game there.
It's like the gay guys who had the red hanky in their left pocket or something,
Yeah, whatever the code is, right?
it's a code. Yeah. So, I mean, that's my favorite thing that's come out of this book is that it's become sort of an acceptable topic of conversation. You said your buddy was talking about it at a dinner party,
Yeah,
like, I love that because
yeah,
even if people don't change the way they live, and the book is not advocating polyamory or swinging
yeah. I
or
totally got that. Yeah,
it's just saying this is the kind of animal we evolved to be, which is no different from saying, look, we evolved to walk 10 to 15 kilometers a day. That's why you've got heart disease, because you sit on your ass all day.
right.
I'm not saying you got to get up and do this or that. I'm just saying there are consequences to ignoring the life that you're evolved to live. And there are reasons that you have these appetites. So even if you're married to the most wonderful woman in the world, you're still going to be attracted to other women. That
Hmm.
doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with her or that there's anything wrong with your marriage. It just means you're Homo sapien. So let's start from that. Let's start from an honest assessment of what kind of animal we are. So
Got
back to your question, what do? We be honest. We be honest with each other. And what that means for different couples is totally up to them. Maybe it means they watch porn together, right?
it.
Maybe it means they open up their relationship. Maybe it means they decide that, okay, this is the truth, but I don't want to hear about it. There are lots of different ways that people deal with this. Again, all around the world. If you look at different cultures, there's a great book called Lust in Translation, where she looks at Pamela Druckerman, I think her name is. She looks at the way people in different societies deal with infidelity. And, like in France, like Thursday afternoons from 5 to 8 p.m., you just don't ask your wife or husband where they were. It's just like that's a cultural tradition.
Okay, that's interesting. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
So you've got a hall pass between this time frame. Do whatever you want, and then we'll see you at dinner time.
Exactly. Yeah. Just
Okay.
don't. I mean, and it's the same in Spain where I've lived most of my life. In Spain, it's like, look, it's kind of understood that these things are going to happen. Just don't embarrass me in public. Don't like take your lover to the restaurant that you and I go to where
Hmm.
friends are going to see you. And don't do anything that's going to mess up our family.
Got it.
You
Got it.
can have lovers, fine, but don't fall in love.
So, do we have time for one more question?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, like the general theme of a lot of the stuff that came up in the kind of like the introduction, because I did a book review earlier this week, and a bunch of people asked some questions, and it's like, let's see, how do I distill this? Men seem fairly open to the concept of having their harem of women, sort of thing. I think it's known, generally speaking today, that men are okay with sleeping with many different women. Women, on the other hand, aren't, for a number of different reasons. I think some of it might have to do with slut shaming and so on and so forth. But I think women to the same, like I've seen women behave in nearly the identical fashion as a man. Or how men are titled as dogs and so on and so forth. Like I've seen women, behave the exact same way from my own experience too. So why is it that, women will want to exchange fidelity for their like they tend to negotiate their sexuality for fidelity. Like if you were to approach a woman on a dating site or something like that and say, hey, beautiful, and they're like, yeah, dig your vibe. And then you're like, okay, I'm into open relationships. Is that something that works for you, sort of thing? And they're, that's not for me. I'm looking for one person. So it's almost like they want to trade their sexuality, their beauty, their sexual marketplace value for fidelity. Like, why do men and women behave in two totally different ways? Like, I'm wondering what your take is on that.
Well, I think we can't look at this without acknowledging that we've got thousands of years of women who dared to be sexually autonomous, being burned at the stake, being kicked out into the street to starve to death. Women haven't had access to the necessities of life directly since the advent of agriculture about 10,000 years ago. Before agriculture, women knew where the food was and they knew how to get it. Mm-hmm. Women knew how to build shelters. Women knew how to cure illnesses and treat wounds, and women knew how to do everything they needed to do. And nobody stood between them and what they needed to survive. But since the advent of agriculture, women have been reduced to the status of farm animals who need someone, a man, either a father or a husband, to connect them to what they need. Women couldn't get work. Women couldn't get food. Women couldn't get money. Women couldn't get anything without a man interceding for them, which is why still the father walks the down the aisle and hands her to the husband like a piece of fucking property. Mm-hmm. And that's still very, very deeply ingrained in our social world. And our social world, cutting edge sort of LGBT rights and all that, most of the world, women are still property, explicitly property. And, in significant parts of the world, if a woman happens to be raped, she gets stoned to death.
Yeah.
Because now she's worthless, mm-hmm. right? It's insane, but that's the world we still live in today. So it shouldn't be surprising at all that women will be trading or trying to leverage the only asset that they have and have had for thousands of years, which is their fertility and their physical beauty. They're trying to leverage that for what they need. Of course they are.
Makes sense.
Not to. So we can't, we can't judge women and say, oh, come on, baby, you should just relax and,
read this book.
Read this book and chill out.
Yeah.
Come on, there are thousands of years of cultural indoctrination. It's very difficult and courageous for a woman. I don't care if she was born and raised in Malibu. Still, it's very courageous for a woman to say, you know what, I like fucking, and I'm going to fuck who I want to fuck, and, it's nobody's business. That woman's got my respect because she's defying a lot of cultural indoctrination there.
Yeah, so it's all social conditioning and less to do with the evolution of the human being, right? Like evolutionary, we're obviously designed to do this, to scatter around and make sure that our DNA is mixed up all nicely in the bowl of humanoids. But you're saying it's all social conditioning. It's all everything that we've been
Yeah, I think it's primarily social conditioning. In Sex at Dawn, we look at some societies that don't have that social conditioning, and what you find in those societies is that women have as many lovers as men do.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying men and women are exactly the same. We have different concerns. We have different ways of perceiving things. And I don't believe that gender identity is purely social conditioning at all. But as far as interest in sexual novelty, if you look at societies that don't have this social conditioning, you look at primates that don't have the social conditioning, you find that female interest in sexual novelty is just as strong as it is in men.
Awesome. All right. Well, I want to thank you for your time, Chris. That's been great. It's answered a bunch of my questions, and I hope it's answered a bunch of yours out there too. You're working on a new book called Civilized to Death. I'll link your website in the description below. Is there anything else that you want to throw off before we wrap up?
Yeah, I do a podcast. It's called Tangentially Speaking. It's a weekly podcast where I chat with interesting people ranging from porn stars to comedians to bank robbers,
Nice.
weed smugglers. I've done about 250 episodes now. It's great. And I just bought a van, outfitted it for
Yeah, I saw that on
recreational
Instagram.
van. Do you see that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw that on
it's
Instagram.
great.
Camper van, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Cool.
take it on the road this summer.
All
Yeah.
right, so I'll link everything in the description below, guys. Grab a copy of Chris Ryan's book. He wrote it with his wife, Casilda. Awesome,
Hey, you
yeah.
got her name right. Well
Well,
done, man.
well, I heard you pronounce it a few times in some of the other videos. The book is a eye opener. It is going to update the lens in which you view yourself and your experiences throughout life. It's right up there with The Rational Male, and I know a lot of you guys have bought that book in the past as well. So I hope it helps you guys out. And I guess if maybe you have any questions or comments, leave them in the bottom of the video. Thanks a lot, Chris. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Thank you.
All right, peace.